Did you know that the US government deployed soldiers and tanks against our own veterans?
When MacArthur moved his troops to the affected area, he knew exactly what he was going to do. And he adorned himself in his dress uniform along with his major aide, Dwight D. Eisenhower.
The force stepped off at 4:30 p.m. More than 200 cavalrymen spread out across Constitution and Pennsylvania avenues. Behind them came 400 infantrymen, followed up by tanks and armored vehicles.
Welcome back to the channel, folks. Dr. Sharma here, physician, board-certified psychiatrist, and Air Force veteran. Now buckle up, folks, because this is really interesting. And yes, it's true. It was Douglas MacArthur and Dwight D. Eisenhower, among others, who were commanding these troops against U.S. military veterans. The question is, what in the world happened that led up to this point, and why is it important to remember this? Let's go back to 1932. 10,000 veterans of World War I march on Washington, D.C. They were promised cash bonuses for their service in World War I. Just as a reminder, the war ended in 1918, okay? And they did this march in 1932 because they absolutely needed the money. Why? Because of the Great Depression. They couldn't find work, they couldn't take care of themselves and their families.
In 1932, Washington was under siege. The capital was surrounded by over 10,000 unemployed veterans of World War I from all over the country. Their only assets were the bonus certificates they'd been given after the war, which promised a cash bonus sometime in the future.
Now imagine that you served in the Great War, as it was called then, and you served until 1918, and it's 14 years later, and you still haven't been given your bonus. I'm amazed they waited so long. Also, the only reason they marched is because they literally couldn't survive without the bonus because of the Great Depression. Now, this also hits on this sentiment that a lot of veterans tell me about. It's this sense that when you're in the military, you're sort of glorified as heroes. Everybody's really appreciative, politicians, the media, and the whole system. But this changes once you become a veteran. And I think this example from history really embodies that.
I know who's made this country worth living in. It's just you fellas. Look, makes me so damn mad a whole lot of people speak of you as tramps. By God, they didn't speak of you as tramps in 1917 and 18. No. Take it from me, this is the greatest demonstration of Americanism we've ever had. Pure Americanism.
So, 10,000 veterans march on the capital of the country, and thousands more are on their way. How does the government respond? Well, the Senate rejected the veterans' demands, then Congress adjourns and goes home. Because of course it's easy for them to do that, no pressing issues, right? By the way, when the politicians left the building, they left through back doors and underground tunnels to avoid the veterans. Of course, because why wouldn't they? Well, the veterans surrounded the Capitol building because they had no other option at that point in order to be heard.
On July 16th, the last day Congress was in session, Washington was on edge. Thousands of angry veterans surrounded the Capitol. Near midnight, the 72nd Congress adjourned. Congressmen left through back doors and underground tunnels to avoid confrontations. The situation had come to a head. The president ordered the evacuation of the veterans from downtown Washington.
So the president, Herbert Hoover at the time, orders the veterans to be evacuated from the area. The question was, who do you get to move 10,000 veterans from the area and keep them from demanding what they deserve? The answer is the military. Imagine the brazenness of this action. You get those who are currently serving to go and remove those who have served in the past. It's almost like as a leader, you're flaunting the fact that you can make this happen. All the while, those soldiers in uniform who were ordered to go there must have been thinking, this might be me in the future after I get out. The president calls on none other than General Douglas MacArthur and his aide, Major Dwight D. Eisenhower. You had 400 infantry soldiers, 200 cavalry on horseback, followed by tanks and armored vehicles bringing up the rear, all moving down the street towards the veterans. One of the cavalrymen was actually Patton, at the time a major. The soldiers had their sabers out, gas masks on, and they started throwing gas grenades at their future selves. I mean, the veterans.
The troops advanced, some jabbing with bayonets.
It's war, the greatest concentration of fighting troops in Washington since 1865.
One of the journalists at the scene said that the veterans were right there, ready for the soldiers, and someone yelled, "Stand firm as long as you can." And then the tear gas came in.
The tear gas was just burning my face. I was trailing behind my dad, and he kept hollering, "Come on, boy, come on, boy."
Marchers were choking from the gas, just like the battlefields in France.
And so they're being forced out of their shacks by smoke bombs and tear gas, hurled by the troops who have been called out by the President of the United States.
I'd never seen anything like it. They systematically went down the line, burned up all the tents and all the possessions of the people there.
So imagine you served in World War I, where you encountered the same gas. You were in the trenches, firing at the enemy, getting fired upon, not knowing if you'd make it out alive. Now you're back home, demanding money you were promised more than a decade earlier, and you deserve it, and you get attacked with the same gas you encountered in the trenches. Now, I know PTSD wasn't a thing back then in terms of a diagnosis. It obviously did exist as an illness, as it always has, but I can almost guarantee you that people were having flashbacks. Again, imagine the audacity of doing something like this, knowing that these veterans went through the same thing in Europe during the war, and doing the same thing to them now that they're back home. Not only that, they burned down the tents, destroyed the veterans' possessions. So already, these veterans don't have anything to their name because of the recession and unemployment, but you take even what they have left away from them.
The orders of the President must be obeyed, and the roaring flames sound the death knell to the fantastic bonus army. In the shadow of the beautiful dome of the Capitol of the United States of America.
When the veterans were interviewed later, they said that they really didn't believe that they'd be ignored by Congress in this way. They were really shocked because they thought that at least there would have been some response or negotiation. They were even more shocked that US troops would be ordered to turn against them. It just kept getting worse. So the veterans, they get pushed back across a drawbridge and back to their main camp, away from downtown and around the Capitol building. Now, MacArthur was actually ordered by the president to not cross the bridge and to not escalate any further. But MacArthur disregards the order and crosses anyway, because I guess when you're high enough up, you can just disobey orders? I didn't know that was a thing.
All through the camp were scenes of panic.
My dad says, "Let's get the hell out of here. The soldiers are going to kill us."
Then troops began to set fire to their wooden shacks. One reporter wrote, "The blaze was so big it lit the whole sky. A nightmare come to life."
I can just imagine that when the veterans saw these fires, their shacks burned to the ground, that it also reminded them of war. The destruction from mortars when they were in the trenches, the sounds of explosions, the heat and smoke from the fires, basically the sounds, the smells, the sensations, everything that triggers the brain to remember those past memories. Except this time, it was their own government attacking them.
The president looked out a window of the White House in the direction of the fire, then retired for the night.
What an absolute disgrace. I don't even have words for that. Imagine how poor of a leader you have to be to do something like this. Now, Hoover ended up losing re-election a few months later. I honestly don't know how much of a factor all of this was in his loss, but I imagine it played at least some role. But elections and politics aside, because that shouldn't be someone's motivation to do the right thing. The lack of a conscience, of morals, values, is just insane. To be able to do this to troops who served in combat, to see this as the only solution rather than negotiate, or even to go out and talk to the veterans yourself as the leader of the country and commander-in-chief. Also, I wonder how much it costs to do all of this. pay the troops who went to subjugate the veterans, pay for the care of the cavalry horses, fuel for the armored vehicles and tanks. Imagine if that money had been used to pay the veterans instead.
The morning after the bonus rout, public sentiment took a dramatic turn against Herbert Hoover. If the expulsion needed a human face, it came in the person of Joe Angelo, whose story was published across the nation.
Joe Angelo gets the Distinguished Service Cross for saving Patton's life on the battlefield. The next morning, Angelo comes to the burned-out field to see Patton. And Patton says, "Take this man away. I don't want to see this man."
The BEF was broken up. The men returned to some city or other, there to roam the streets, hopelessly seeking work or to shuffle in bread lines. There they remain, crying examples not of the need for the bonus, but of the need for a new American system.
Imagine being confronted by the man who literally saved your life in war, and now that same man needs your help, and instead you turn him away. There are so many terms for this that I can think of, but the main one, cowardice. And yes, I know who he went on to be, Patton, but still. So why am I talking about this? 1, I never knew about this. I was never taught about these events. I haven't heard anything about this from anywhere. 2, this is extremely important for us to remember. 1932 wasn't in ancient times, okay? This was less than a century ago. We have to remember history, learn from it, and ensure that it isn't repeated again. 3, it shows us that as veterans, we need to stick together because we can't rely on others to look out for us. Now, I don't mean to get dark like that. We have support systems in place and families and things like that, but what I mean is we have to advocate for ourselves and each other. This specifically reminds me of something. A lot of veterans tell me, and I feel the same way, that when we were in the military, even though we might not have agreed with or liked what we were ordered to do, we could still rely on those people around us. And we would try to do the right thing for those same people. When I think back to my time as a flight doc, both at home base and while deployed, I can remember feeling this way. And yes, that photo on the left was of me. I look like an absolute kid, I know. Anyway, there were lots of times when things ordered by leadership didn't make sense to those of us working on the ground, or there were weird, ineffective policies. But we did the best we could, specifically for those around us, the people in our unit, the people we trained with on a daily basis. And I think that continues as we become veterans, as we enter the civilian division, right? So let's never forget what happened in 1932 to the bonus army. Let's never forget that the US government ordered our own military to attack veterans who were simply asking for what was promised to them 14 years earlier. Let's never forget that during the Great Depression, when veterans of the Great War were struggling, both Congress and the President turned their backs on them, both literally and figuratively. And let's try to never allow this to happen again. That's it for today's video. I hope this was helpful for you guys to take a deeper look at the tragedy of the bonus army and what they had to go through. If you found this helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. It really helps and it tells me that I'm doing something right. Also, please drop a comment below about your thoughts on the topic. Did you know about this? Had you learned about it before? Where did you learn about it? And are you shocked if you never knew about it? And of course, let me know if you have requests on what to cover in the future. I'd be happy to make a video on it. As always, thanks for watching. Dr. Sharma signing off. See you next time.